There was a divine palace in Yi Futian's micro-world. It had a mountain, a creek, and a lot of foliage. There were some pavilions scattered aesthetically. They were elegant yet stylish and felt like a paradise outside of the world. It was peaceful and beautiful. There was a divine palace in Yi Futian's micro-world. It had a mountain, a creek, and a lot of foliage. There were some pavilions scattered aesthetically. They were elegant yet stylish and felt like a paradise outside of the world. It was peaceful and beautiful. This was the string pavilion. At the moment, elegant music was streaming out of the divine palace. It made one feel relaxed and happy. This was only one corner of the micro-world. Many years had passed since Yi Futian had created this micro-world. Over these long years, the micro-world was no longer the barren land from before. The cultivators in here had established their own permanent cultivation lands. The string pavilion was where Yi Futian and his teacher Hua Fenglu had lived when he was young. Clearly, this was where Hua Fengliu's family lived. His master, mistress, Jiu, Nianyu, and the others all lived here. The graceful music came from Hua Fenglu. Even if he had wanted to help with the war, he was powerless. Plus, this was Yi Futian's micro-world. There were no conflicts, and Yi Futian would not discuss the conflicts outside with him either. It was long past the time for his master to retire. Yi Futian naturally would not let him worry. Two maidens were cultivating at the mountaintop of the string pavilion. The two of them had extraordinary temperaments, as if they had already left the mundane world and were heavenly fairies. One of the women's beauty was out of the world. She looked ethereal and clear, completely untainted. The other woman was like the incarnation of a perfect goddess. There was no flaw on her entire body. She was serene and elegant. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. Naturally, these two women were Hua Qingqing and Hua Jiu. They had been cultivating together the entire time. Right now, it seemed that the Buddhist voice echoed throughout the mountain. It was Hua Qingqing reciting ancient scriptures for Hua Jiu. She was like a Buddhist light. The glow of the Buddhist clan shimmered faintly on her body. She was extraordinarily pure and sacred and could not be desecrated. Meanwhile, Hua Jiu bathed under the Buddhist light and seemed to have entered a miraculous state. She was utterly immersed in cultivation and forgot even herself. Without them realizing it, a white-haired figure landed on the ancient mountaintop. He did not disturb their cultivation and just stood to the side quietly. Hua Qingqing was still reading the Buddhist scripture. Hua Jiu was still immersed in her meditation and cultivation, completely focused. Yi Futian was like air. No one paid attention to him. He had never been treated like this before. However, he was not angry at all either. Instead, he looked at Hua Qingqing with appreciation. But when he looked at Hua Jiu, there was more gentle affection. Brother-in-law. A voice traveled into Yi Futian's eardrums. He looked back and saw Nianyu blinking at him in the distance. Even though she was not a little girl anymore, Hua Nianyu still acted like it. After all, judging from her cultivation, her age was still very young. How long have they cultivated for? Yi Futian asked, transmitting his voice to Hua Nianyu. A few decades have passed like a day, Hua Nianyu said. I don't understand what they're cultivating, but it seems that sister's cultivation has reached a critical moment. Then why are you here? Yi Futian asked. I don't know either. It seems to be easier to be enlightened when cultivating here, Hua Nianyu said strangely. My comprehension of cultivation is much clearer too, and I can understand more easily. Is it the effect of the Buddhist voice? Yes. Yi Futian nodded without hesitation. This is the light of enlightenment. Yi Futian's gaze fell upon Hua Qingqing's body as he spoke. Hua Qingqing had been the Buddhist lamp accompanying the Buddha in cultivation. She had listened to the Buddha teaching the scriptures, attending the Buddha for 1,000 years as the ancient Buddha Qingdeng. Then consciousness was born from the Buddhist lamp. In a way, Hua Qingqing's intelligence had been born because of the Buddha. She had been made from intelligence. Nianyu did not understand. She would have to ask Grandpa Xian when she got a chance. Usually, her sister and brother-in-law were very busy and did not have time to pay attention to her, so Hua Nianyu would bother Lord Taixian and the others. At that moment, the Buddhist light faded from Hua Qingqing's body. Her pretty eyes opened, and she gazed in Yi Futian's direction. Then Hua Jiu also opened her eyes. Her gaze fell upon Yi Futian's body, and she smiled brilliantly. "You're back," Hua Jiu said gently. "When did you break your path?" Yi Futian asked. "The years that you left," Hua Jiu replied with a smile as if she was talking about something unimportant. Yi Futian had dealt with matters in the outside world for 3 months without returning, but in here, 20 years had passed already. That was why Hua Jiu said the years that he had been gone for. "Jiu, why did you break the path?" Yi Futian's voice was low but gentle. This was his heavenly path world. He was in charge of the world law, while Hua Jiu was his wife. She did not need to take the risk and break the path. "Qingqing is here, so there aren't any dangers," Hua Jiu said, still smiling gently. "Plus, I have my own comprehension from these years and want to cultivate my own path. Is that not allowed?" Yi Futian looked towards Hua Qingqing. With Hua Qingqing by his side, he also had a miraculous feeling. It felt just like what Nianyu had said, as if it could bring him to enlightenment. Hua Qingqing was the reincarnation of the Buddhist lamp. Her cultivation was very unique. Yi Futian could feel the light of enlightenment from her Buddhist light. All these years, Hua Qingqing had also been helping Hua Jiu cultivate. "I don't know what you two want." Yi Futian shook his head with a wry smile. How could he really blame Hua Jiu? He was just a bit worried. "Don't worry. Everything is successful," Hua Qingqing replied with a smile. Her voice was gentle and made people believe her fully. "Yes." Yi Futian nodded. "Qingqing, you have to keep an eye on Jiu. Don't let her fool around." Hua Qingqing smiled and nodded. "Brother-in-law, are you leaving as soon as you're back?" Nianyu muttered. Earlier, they had been transmitting their voices. Was her brother-in-law planning on slipping away without even actually talking to her this time? "Nianyu, your brother-in-law has many things to do," Hua Jiu said to Nianyu. Nianyu hung her head, feeling a bit down. "Hurry and go cultivate." "No need to mind me," Hua Jiu said to Yi Futian. Naturally, she knew that the most important thing to Yi Futian now was time. "I'll leave after visiting Master and Mistress." Yi Futian nodded. He left after strolling around. He indeed had a lot of matters to handle and had no time to waste at all. After Yi Futian left, Hua Jiu asked Hua Qingqing, "Qingqing, would it be effective if you helped him cultivate?" "It's limited." Hua Qingqing shook her head. "He has already created his own world and has already reached enlightenment. Even with the blessing of wisdom, it's hard for him to comprehend more. Everything depends on himself." "I see." Hua Jiu nodded. "Let us continue cultivating then." "Okay," Hua Qingqing said. Then they closed their eyes. The Buddhist voice wrapped around them. It was as if someone was reading the Buddhist scriptures on this divine mountain, making this divine palace seem like an extremely sacred pure land. After Yi Futian visited Hua Jiu, he went to many other places. He checked over the state of their cultivation and gave some help. Then he left to focus on his own cultivation. Yi Futian focused on cultivation. He had demon beasts under his control in the outside world, so he would know if anything major happened. Yi Futian focused on cultivation. He had demon beasts under his control in the outside world, so he would know if anything major happened. After he led the army to fight everywhere for 3 months, the War of the Six Realms was not as aggressive as before. Even though war still existed in the Six Realms, it was much more peaceful than before. The invaders from the 3 realms did not dare to kill mindlessly anymore. Time passed quickly. A few decades passed in the snap of a finger. Of course, this was the time in Yi Futian's world. That day, Yi Futian sat cross-legged on a divine mountain in his micro-world. His entire body dazzled and light flowed across him. In the span of a breath, he seemed to produce limitless vitality. If he spat out a hot breath, it would make the sun hotter. When he spat out a cool breath, it made coldness shroud the world. All of his actions, even his inhale and exhale, could affect the operation of this universe. The sound of his heartbeat seemed to have transformed into the universe's pulse. When he was calm, the universe would run smoothly. When he was angered, the entire universe would be upended. Yi Futian continued to meditate in this quiet state, immersing in it. He seemed to breathe together with the universe. That day, Futian finally opened his eyes and took a deep breath. He did not need to perceive the entire world. Everything had been imprinted in his mind. Nowadays, he was the entire world. The entire universe was him. 70 years. Futian murmured. This time, he had actually spent 70 years cultivating in seclusion. If he added the time from before, it had already been more than 100 years. Of course, 70 years was not even 1 year in the outside world. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. But in Futian's world, dramatic changes had already occurred. With the 40 years after the war had erupted and the 70 years now, more than 100 years had passed already. There had been decades of cultivation before the war had erupted too. One could imagine how many great changes had happened. Even the cultivators that Futian had collected into his micro-world in the 3 months of battles and joined the legions, their cultivation states had improved too. They had become a young force in the 8 legions. As for the core figures who had already entered the path of the emperors, their cultivation states had become even stronger. A batch of great emperors had appeared in the micro-world. Right now, Futian's body in the outside world was also completely brilliant. He radiated with dazzling divine light as if he was no longer a human. Instead, he was the incarnation of the path. Even though he was in the vast void, he still did not seem minuscule. Merely sitting there, he was like the absolute center of that world. Boom! At that moment, Futian's eyes opened, and divine light shot out of his orbs. Even the space here shook because of it with unsteady but intense ripples. There had not been any commotion in all these years. Has the human ancestor returned? Futian thought. Even though it had not been long in the outside world, the human ancestor's true form had always been cultivating and preparing to return at any time. He did not know how he was now. With a thought, Futian's figure vanished. The heavenly imperial city of the heaven realm was now under the rule of the strong figures of the human realm. The force from the human divine palace personally took over. The human realm had connected a space passageway to travel through the 6 realms and conquer the realms more easily. The human realm even constructed many majestic palaces in the heavenly imperial city. Just then, an extremely horrifying divine light suddenly descended from the dome of the sky. The cultivators of the heavenly imperial city all saw it. Many layers of the sky fell from the dome of the heavens, carrying many cultivators and various ancient pavilions and palaces. They stood atop the heavenly imperial palace. The 99 heavens. The cultivators of the heavenly imperial palace felt their hearts pulse. After the heaven realm was conquered, the original cultivators of the heaven realm became the lowest class. Usually, they kept a low profile, but after seeing the 99 heavens reappear in the sky above the heavenly imperial city now, it was like their hearts had been struck. Was the heavenly emperor back? The 99 heavens were not sealed off yet. They saw many cultivator legions appear in the sky above the heavenly imperial city. Their auras were all frightening. Like a heavenly army, every single person had extraordinary temperaments. There were also the generals of each legion in the sky above the grand armies. The cultivators of the heaven realm saw many familiar figures. Great skylords Black and White Almighty were now great emperors. The 4 heavenly kings had entered the great emperor plane now too. Dong Huangduan, princess of the divine prefecture, great emperor plane. There were many other people whose bodies were covered with the divine great emperor glow. It was like a group of gods descending. The blinding divine light fell into the eyes of the heavenly imperial city cultivators, shaking their hearts and souls. 1 year after the war had erupted, the heavenly emperor came, bringing a group of gods. It was no longer one or a few great emperors. It was an army of great emperors. The age of gods had finally come. The human ancestor ruled the old gods. The heavenly emperor led the new gods. They gazed to the top of the sky, the peak of the 99 heavens. A white-haired figure stood there, like the master of all gods. His gaze overlooked the lower sky and swept toward the heavenly imperial city. "Retake the heavenly imperial city?" he said. "Yes, heavenly emperor." The voices rang throughout the void as the many legions accepted the command simultaneously. After cultivating in the micro-world, they were all incredibly reverent of Yi Futian. He was the god of creation who had created a complete world. He could even rule over time and change the law of time. The heavenly emperor had returned and would rule over the entire world. The strong figures of the human realm all took out their communication items and asked for reinforcement. The 6 grand legions advanced toward the heavenly imperial palace. This was fated to be a battle with no surprises. The gods that Yi Futian led did not attack. They watched the great battle in the heavenly imperial city quietly as everything was destroyed utterly. The strong figures of the human realm were absolutely crushed. What put them in even more despair was that there were no reinforcements. The heavenly army that had returned had not destroyed the transmission matrix, as if letting reinforcement come freely. However, no one came to reinforce them. Clearly, they also knew how frightening these 6 legions were. Coming would probably be suicide. The cultivators of the original heaven realm all witnessed this scene. This time, Yi Futian did not leave. Instead, he just watched how the heavenly army retook the heavenly imperial city. Is the heavenly emperor already able to fight against the gods led by the human ancestor? The people of the heavenly imperial city all thought. Clearly, heavenly emperor Yi Futian did not plan on avoiding battle anymore. He had the 99 heavens reappear in the heaven realm and retook the heavenly imperial palace. He led the group of great emperors in a comeback. He was clearly prepared to declare war. At the peak of the human divine palace of the human realm, the human ancestor was sitting cross-legged while cultivating. That moment, he seemed to sense something and his eyes opened. He looked into the distance. Has he proved his path? The human ancestor murmured softly. He did not think that his biggest opponent would be a junior. But actually, he had always been fighting with this lineage. From the heavenly emperor to the sovereign princess, and now to Yi Futian, it had never changed. Just like how he had had the final victory the last 2 times, the result would be the same this time too. The heavenly emperor and heavenly imperial palace reconstructed the 99 heavens. The heavenly emperor's army swept through the heaven realm. Cultivators all over the heaven realm reacted, following the great army of the heavenly emperor in resistance. They destructed and drove out the human realm cultivators, taking back the territory of the heaven realm like wildfire. The heavenly emperor and heavenly imperial palace reconstructed the 99 heavens. The heavenly emperor's army swept through the heaven realm. Cultivators all over the heaven realm reacted, following the great army of the heavenly emperor in resistance. They destructed and drove out the human realm cultivators, taking back the territory of the heaven realm like wildfire. Back then, the soldiers of the human realm had conquered almost all of the heaven realm in 3 months without getting blood on their swords. But this time, the heaven realm fought back fiercely. Each of the 6 legions were able to sweep through a corner of the world, let alone doing it together. One could imagine how terrifying it was. Even without looking at the others, just the Revelation Legion contained the backbone of the original Donghuang Imperial Palace. Then after a century of practice and training many new members, they were now an extremely frightening force. Thus, this time was even faster. In many places, the strong figures of the human realm heard the news and began to retreat before they even attacked. They did not dare to loiter. If they continued guarding the place, it would probably only mean death. The Heaven Realm's army were completely merciless towards the invaders. Thus, this battle swept through the Heaven Realm as fast as lightning. In a mere half-month's time, they had retaken most of the Heaven Realm. After the Heaven Realm was retaken, the strong figures that had invaded the Divine Prefecture and Buddhist world also started retreating. They were extremely scattered because they had taken too much territory. If the Heaven Realm's army came by now, they would not be able to hold up at all. They had to gather their strength together first before they could fight against the Heaven Realm's army. The majestic heavenly palace loomed in the 99 heavens. Heavenly Emperor Yi Futian stood at the peak pavilion of the heavenly palace. And as the heavenly emperor's father, Donghuang the Great stood to his side. Empress Hua Jiyu and Donghuang Dian sat on the left and right of Yi Futian and Donghuang the Great. Godfather Yu too stood in the first spot below the heavenly emperor. Below that was the string emperor and book deity. They had been followers of Yi Futian's mother. Many strong figures sat below the steps. Some also stood there. Those with seats were the great emperors from the Buddhist clan. The Buddha of the Buddhist clan was the senior of both Donghuang the Great and Yi Futian, so he naturally had the respect he deserved. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. The strong figures from the divine prefecture, heaven realm, and those who followed Yi Futian all stood. After all, Yi Futian and Donghuang the Great were up there. However, when dozens of people stood there, the scene was still extremely spectacular. These people were all strong figures who had entered the great emperor plane. The heaven court of the heavenly palace were practically all great emperors. They were a true great emperor legion. Further down was the vast land of the 99 heavens. The 6 great legions were there. Each legion had their own camps and were further divided into smaller legions. They were scattered but organized and had their own leaders. This kind of scene was honestly very breathtaking. The highest powers of the 3 realms were gathered here. It was also the heavenly emperor's first time officially gathering everyone here to discuss matters. Everyone had come. No one was missing. I pay my respects to your majesties, heavenly emperor and Donghuang. Just then, Yu Tu turned toward Yi Futian and took the lead in bowing. With Yu Tu leading them, everyone below instantly responded and bowed. I pay my respects to your majesty the heavenly emperor, your majesty Donghuang. Instantly, the earth-shaking voices resounded through the 99 heavens, making all the strong figures feel their blood bubbling hotly. After cultivating in the micro-world, their group had already reached this strong state without realizing it. Yu Tu had a solemn expression, but he was full of ineffable emotions inside. His young master had finally reached the step. Being bowed to by various gods was such a shocking scene. If she could see today's scene, she must feel gratified. Next, they only had one goal: kill the human ancestor, take down the human realm, dark world, and empty divine realm, and unify the 7 realms. Godfather, Yi Futian called. Then he looked at everyone and said, "No need to bow." Yi Futian was still very kind, but when they looked at the strong figure in the throne, everyone realized that this junior was already standing at the pinnacle of the world. Even Donghuang the Great and the Buddha of the 6 emperors were willing to give him this seat. Among the crowd, many cultivators had had rivalries with Yi Futian before, such as Great Emperor Di Hao and the others. Yi Futian did not kill them, but they still had restrictions. Imprints had been planted in them with special tactics. They were kept alive because they still had some value and could be used. Among the many strong figures from the 18 domain manors of the divine prefecture, there were also many old friends of Yi Futian who felt very emotional. As for those from the Ziwei Imperial Palace, they felt genuinely happy and proud for Yi Futian when seeing today's grandiosity. Their palace lord had now reached the peak of the cultivation world. Probably even the evil emperor and dark sovereign would not fight against Yi Futian anymore. No one was born with the duty to save the world, let alone the fact that this battle was still decided by the top figures. All of these cultivators were just cannon fodder, at most. If possible, Yi Futian was not even willing to have them participate in battle. Letting the great emperors fight in the ultimate battle was enough. No one was born with the duty to save the world, let alone the fact that this battle was still decided by the top figures. All of these cultivators were just cannon fodder, at most. If possible, Yi Futian was not even willing to have them participate in battle. Letting the great emperors fight in the ultimate battle was enough. However, the human ancestor wanted to control the 7 realms. He ordered all the realms to go to war, sweeping everyone into the battleground. Thus, there had to be a force like this in order to resist the invasion. Otherwise, the 3 realms would be like a handful of sand. It would be conquered and invaded by the other side. The group of strong figures was silent for a moment. Then someone stated loudly, "I'm willing to go to war with the heavenly emperor. I'm willing to go to war with the heavenly emperor." All the voices resounded in the air. Many of the cultivators here were from emperor-level forces. The majority were all willing to do this. Yi Futian's gaze looked around below. the deafening voices sounded in the heavens. However, he realized that many people still did not speak out. The spirited voices seemed to have covered those who were swayed, but they were still under Yi Futian's stare. He extended a hand, signaling for the people to be quiet. Then he continued saying, "I am not choosing those who are willing this time. Instead, I am giving people a chance to step back. You all can be rest assured. You've all contributed in the earlier battles. Those who are willing to step back today will not be questioned." There were still no voices. It seemed that no one dared to take the lead. After a moment, someone finally stepped out, but he still did not speak. Instead, he took a few steps toward the back, separating from the great army. Gradually, others retreated after him. Their cultivation had improved greatly in the past few years. Many thought that this was already enough, and after calming down, they indeed felt that there was no need to continue fighting. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. For them, whether it was the human ancestor ruling the Seven Realms or Yi Futian, it had a great influence on the Seven Realms, but it probably would not be too different for them personally. There was no need to gamble. If they lost the battle, they would lose their lives. More and more people stepped back. There were quite a few from the 6 legions. Many of them were the ones who had joined later. They had joined the army passionately when they had been invaded and felt hatred and anger. Other than that, many people from the Heaven Realm and Divine Prefecture also withdrew. Some of the Divine Prefecture's top forces were among them, including strong figures of domain chiefs' manors, such as the chief manor of the Shangqing domain. The most loyal were the believers of the Ziwei Imperial Palace who had always followed Yi Futian and the Buddhists. There were also direct forces under the Donghuang Imperial Palace. They all had their own beliefs. Yi Futian watched all of this quietly. As more and more people withdrew, this gradually reached a certain scale. It did not stop until some time later. As expected, those who benefit but lack faith are more likely to betray, Yi Futian thought when he saw this scene. For example, some of the domain chiefs' manors and top forces of the Divine Prefecture had been the upper level of the Divine Prefecture, but still, many of them withdrew. Anyone else? Yi Futian continued. Some more scattered people stepped back. Finally, a moment later, no one moved again. Yi Futian was a bit disappointed but also glad. He was disappointed that many people had withdrawn. He was glad because, compared to the overall group, they were still the minority. He was not perfect. Even though he did not wish to see people die in battle and gave them a chance to withdraw, deep down, he was still disappointed in the people who withdrew. This was unavoidable as a human. With a thought, countless beams of divine light shone down from the sky, transforming into many imprints. They fell onto the cultivators who had chosen to leave. "Your Majesty," someone yelped. "Heavenly Emperor, you promised not to question us." They were a little panicked at this scene. Earlier, they had believed in Yi Futian's words, which was why they dared to step back. But now, Yi Futian left an imprint. "Do not worry," Yi Futian said, his voice resounding in the void. This caused everyone to quiet down and let out a breath. In that previous moment, they had thought that Yi Futian would punish them. Even though they believed that Yi Futian was not that kind of person, they were still a bit afraid. "Your Majesty, why did you?" someone opened their mouth to ask. "There will only be 2 results after this battle, victory or defeat," Yi Futian said. "If this battle ends in defeat, then those who choose to fight may very well die. They will die for their own faith while you all can live and continue cultivating. If it is the other result and we win this battle, then I will reform the world law, and the divine positions will belong to the cultivators with faith." When he finished speaking, countless beams of light fell again, landing on the cultivators who had chosen to stay. Those who chose to stay clearly had their own beliefs. They were willing to gamble their lives and continue to fight. If Yi Futian managed the world law in the future, then the people who sat in the divine seats would be chosen from them. This meant that those who chose to leave would forever lose the chance at a divine position. Their hearts seemed to be struck by lightning at that moment. The age of gods was coming, while the great emperor plane was a mutual goal that everyone pursued. Did they lose the right to that? Go now. Yi Futian waved his hand and a spatial door opened in the 99 heavens. Many cultivators felt a little muddled as they stepped into the spatial door and left the micro-world. They knew that Yi Futian was not just trying to intimidate them. If Yi Futian won this battle, he would be the ruler of the world law. Of course, he would determine who possessed the divine positions. Those who had already reached the top of Yi Futian's micro-world felt even more complicated emotions inside. Not too long after, that group left the micro-world. Other than those who did not dare to leave, all that remained had their own beliefs. Next, what you all must do is focus on cultivating. It's best if we don't need you to participate in battle, Yi Futian announced. Everyone felt emotional in their hearts. The Heavenly Emperor really did have a fresh personality. I was not trying to scare people with my words. If we lose, you all might die. Thus, if we die, then you all should abandon the fighting and live on, Yi Futian said. Go now. The strong figures all bowed and then retreated gradually. Of course, some people were still on the steps because of their close relationship with Yi Futian, even though they were not great emperors. Yi Futian's eyes fell upon someone and asked, Qingyuan, why did you not step onto the path of the emperors? Xia Qingyuan could definitely step onto the path of the emperors with his help, but she still had not stepped onto that path. Heavenly Emperor, I won't be able to change the battlefield of the Great Emperor Plane even if I do step onto the path of the emperors. On the other hand, if I stay below the Great Emperor Plane, I can save many people if war erupts, Xia Qingyuan replied. She cultivated the path of life and death. Yi Futian nodded slightly and looked at her. It felt a little strange to hear her call him Heavenly Emperor. Most of the people agreed with Xia Qingyuan's thoughts. The total number of great emperors was small. Hence, the situation would be very messy if the cultivators apart from the great emperors started an all-out war. Xia Qingyuan could save many lives if she were to join the war as a combat medic and rescue the injured. Most of the people agreed with Xia Qingyuan's thoughts. The total number of great emperors was small. Hence, the situation would be very messy if the cultivators apart from the great emperors started an all-out war. Xia Qingyuan could save many lives if she were to join the war as a combat medic and rescue the injured. Many of the great emperors saw her in a new light as she had stopped herself walking on the path of the emperors because of this, especially the Buddhists, who put their hands before her and recited the Buddhist sutra with the sound of Buddha. At the end of the day, this war will be decided by the elites. Thus, I will do all I can to prevent a battle between lower cultivation level combatants from breaking out. I am planning to infiltrate the human realm to see if I can sneak a look at the human ancestors' real body's cultivation level, Yi Futian uttered. Now that his cultivation had improved to the next level, invading the human divine palace was considered a trial. He would not mind going on a killing spree if the opportunity presented itself. This operation is a little too risky. Please reconsider the idea, Your Majesty, Yu Tu suggested. Although he was Yi Futian's godfather, he had been greeting the latter as his young master. But he had since changed the form of address of the second mentioned to Heavenly Emperor or Your Majesty during an oral address at that moment. I don't agree with this idea as well, the String Emperor chimed in. Did Yi Futian want to infiltrate the human divine palace as an experiment? If the actual body of the human ancestor at the human divine palace were to awake, it would undoubtedly be hazardous. The people who had disagreed first were followers of Yi Futian's late mother. They were the true loyal retainers of the sovereign princess back then. Hence, they immediately freaked out upon hearing his idea since he was the only progeny of his mother. If the human ancestor's real body had recovered, he would have shown up here by now. Even the likes of Ji Wudao could retreat unscathed after invading the human divine palace back then, Yi Futian explained. Furthermore, even if the human ancestor almost had a full recovery, he might not necessarily be capable of keeping me there. The voice of Yi Futian was filled with absolute confidence. With his current strength, it would be an arduous task to trap him as long as he did not let down his guard. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. I second that, Dong Huang the Great, who sat beside Yi Futian, stated. If the human ancestor did not recover, this might very well be a chance for us. Should any unforeseen dangers befall him, he could flee from the scene right away. So, I don't see a problem here. I think it is worth a shot. Since Donghuang the Great was the father of Yi Futian, he would never allow his son to get into any difficult situation. However, the latter was bearing the responsibility of preserving 7 realms. Being the one who sat on the divine throne, he should perform his duties as heavenly emperor. Since the father and son duo, Donghuang the Great and Yi Futian, had spoken, everyone remained taciturn. All of them could tell that Yi Futian wished to avoid an all-out war as much as possible. It would be better to solve the issue by himself, while the second-best outcome would be the great emperors settling the conflicts among themselves. The last thing he wanted to see was the common people living in the 7 realms being involved in their war. You're right, father. It is definitely worth trying. Don't worry. I'll be careful, Yi Futian replied. The people at the scene nodded after hearing that. Even you too did not insist on discouraging him anymore. Yi Futian knitted his brows together all of a sudden. Then he stretched his hand and waved it. After which, a projection appeared before his eyes. A group of cultivators with extraordinary temperament showed up around the Heaven's Gate outside the 99 heavens. They were all great emperor plane beings who were surrounded by divine light as they looked at the 99 heavens. We would like to have an audience with Heavenly Emperor. The voice of the one leading the great emperors could be heard announcing that. His deafening voice shook the 99 heavens and traveled to the heavenly palace. Everyone inside could listen to him. Let's go and check it out, Yi Futian said. With a thought, a door materialized in front of the heavenly palace. Then he stood up and took a step forward to exit the door. The other cultivators followed him behind and walked out of it as well. At once, a similar spatial door appeared around the area of the Heaven's Gate. Yi Futian and the others could be seen getting out of it. After taking a step forward, Yi Futian and his subordinates turned to stare at the great emperors outside the 99 heavens, who they had never seen before. Furthermore, Yi Futian could sense something unusual about the aura emanated from the great emperors. Now that he had reached the realm of the heavenly path, he could know why he had this kind of feeling. It was because this group of great emperors was not from around here. They were beings from another universe, also known as extraterrestrial beings. State your business, Yi Futian piped while staring at the great emperors. The leading figure, who looked in their 40s, was clothed in splendor with a dignified appearance. Their body was surrounded by a golden divine light, giving off a highborn vibe as if they had an extraordinary background. I presume that your majesty already knew we are from the outer realms, the leader of the outer realms' great emperors answered. It seems like your majesty has a conflict with the gods of the human realm. We had come from afar and witnessed this war. But we do not wish to see it continue like this. So, we would like to if your majesty wants some help. Yi Futian was confused after hearing that. Then he looked at them and asked, Help? Do you want to participate in this war? If it is your will, then yes, the other party replied. Yi Futian was curious why they were so confident that they could be of help to him. How do you plan to do that? What is your condition? Yi Futian questioned. If these people were genuinely trying to help out of goodwill, he would not mind having a few extra hands. But he knew for a fact that nothing would come free in life. These individuals were extraterrestrial beings who came from another universe. He still had no way of telling if they were friends or foes. But according to his speculation, they would most likely be his enemies. An outsider would never be of like mind with them. How could these people, who had come from afar, claim to have no agendas at all? Back then, his mother had reconstructed the heavenly path because she came to know the existence of other universes. Her ultimate wish was to prove her path as the apex cultivator to protect this universe. We will not ask for any unusual term. We want your majesty to open a cross-universe space passage so that the cultivators from our world can come over as reinforcements, the person noted. Yet, Yi Futian furrowed his brows at that person's words. The other party requested him to open a space passage that would connect 2 different universes so that their forces could come over here. Listening to this term alone was enough to let him imagine multiple possible outcomes. What if the other party used the space passage that connected 2 universes for invasion? Most importantly, he had no clue about the strength of the strongest cultivators from other universes yet. Therefore, he had been looking for the answer to several questions. What was the summit of cultivation? Did the finishing line even exist? Nevertheless, he could tell it was rather difficult for the other party to open a space passage that could cross between universes. At the very least, they still could not pull it off yet. Hence, they offered to work with him. I want to know more about your universe, Donghuang the Great queried as he took a step forward. Also, were the 7 great emperors who passed away previously one of yours? Donghuang the Great became vigilant right after hearing the words of the other party. If the space passage that could connect both universes were to be opened, the cultivators from their world could cross over to this world. So, this request should never be accepted. And that was the reason he wanted to know their overall strength and the extent of the ability of their strongest cultivators. After hearing his father's question, Futian recalled the 7 great emperors he killed in one hit. This group of great emperors had traveled together. So, their powers must be from the same source. This group of great emperors had traveled together. So, their powers must be from the same source. Was there a ruler-class individual in their universe? Were these cultivators the subordinates of a ruling class like the 7 great emperors Futian had killed previously? What was their true purpose of wanting to open a space passage that could connect between universes? Were they trying to help him out with no hidden agenda? While Futian was looking at them, their leader replied, "Yes. We had some conflicts previously, but we should let the past be the past. Please pay it no heed, Your Majesty." As expected, all these people were from the same force. The 7 individuals were wielders of the power of judgment. They could be considered the judges of an elite organization. The 7 of them were a single entity. These people could be from an extremely powerful force. Futian, our universe had gone through the collapse of the heavenly path, causing the decline of our cultivation world. However, it isn't the case for other universes. If they were to continue their growth, their overall strength could be higher than expected. If we were to open a space passage that could connect both of our universes, they might be a greater threat than the human ancestor. Donghuang the Great notified Futian through telepathy in concern. I got it. Futian nodded. He understood this very well, even without Donghuang the Great's reminder. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU to open a cross-cosmos portal for cultivators from an unknown universe would be equivalent to bringing disaster upon themselves. We will settle this problem among ourselves. Thanks for your offer, Futian declined. All of you have traveled from a distant universe. I will welcome you with open arms if you are here as our guests. But if you try anything funny like what the 7 great emperors did previously, I will never hesitate to annihilate you immediately. After hearing Futian's words, the other party furrowed their brows in displeasure. They had been observing the situation in this universe ever since they arrived here, only to find a declined world where the total number of great emperors was very little. Initially, they had the intention of saving this world. After opening the space passage that connected the 2 universes, the cultivators of this world could finally see the true divine relic. With that, this world would have a united law at last. Yet, little did they expect that Futian would reject them and even dared to threaten them. You know very well about the current situation in the 7 realms, Your Majesty. Why are you so quick to reject us? Are you not afraid that we might look for other people to work together? That person remarked. They had approached Futian because the latter was at a disadvantage. So, they had assumed that he might probably agree to receive their help. On the other hand, it was nearly impossible that the human ancestor would cooperate with them since their goal was the same as his. Right after he finished speaking, an overwhelming divine light glowed from the eyes of Futian, who emanated a palpable rage all around himself. Immediately, the color of the sky changed while frightening divine thunder rumbled violently. Just then, the divine light of sun and moon shone and covered the group of great emperors. Are you trying to threaten me? Futian's voice was as loud as divine thunder traveling across the void, shaking the atmosphere and sky. As the great path roared, every motion in this realm seemed to be brimming with the heavenly rule power as if he was the great path himself. A hint of watchfulness flashed across the eyes of the group of great emperors after sensing an intimidating threat from Futian. The expression of the leader's face turned solemn after realizing that they were a little too impatient. They should avoid angering him since they were in his territory at the moment. No, we wouldn't dare to think of it. We came here with good intentions, thinking that perhaps we could ally. Since things are not working out for the both of us, we shall take our leave first, the leader uttered as they felt the pressure of the god's might on them. Instantly, an epiphany moment hit them that they could not afford to provoke Yi Futian in this universe. So, they should retreat at once. Hold on! Yi Futian shrieked. Their blood ran cold and they stared at him. You are coming and going as you like. What are you taking me for? Yi Futian demanded. You did not answer our question yet. I want to know your purpose in requesting a space passage between our universes to be opened. Right after he spoke, the boundless sky and earth were covered by his divine power. At that moment, the entire dimension seemed to be frozen. None of them could leave this place without breaking a sweat. What is the meaning of this, Your Majesty? The leader commented. Yi Futian set his eyes on them. Dong Huang the Great moved forward from behind and unleashed the divine power of revelation. In that instant, the group of great emperors had gotten their divine powers restricted before they could react. It was even harder to release their divine powers on top of the pressure from Yi Futian's god's might. Jiyu, it's your turn. Yi Futian shouted. Hua Jiyu nodded. She understood his order tacitly because they were husband and wife. An invisible divine power permeated the atmosphere. It was formless and intangible, somewhat similar to the divine power of revelation. And it could invade the enemy's spiritual will in a flash. After having their divine powers retrained, their spiritual wills were blocked by a powerful barrier. They could feel an invisible and colorless wall covering their spirit domains and sealing them. Divine power of colorless realm. A divine light surrounded Hua Jiyu. Her garments were fluttering while her black hair flowed in the wind when she charged her divine power with all her might. This was the divine power that Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing gained enlightenment on together. The latter had helped the former with Buddhist doctrines, and she eventually developed the divine power of colorless realm that could suppress the spirit domain of other cultivators. Under the suppression of the divine power of revelation and the divine power of colorless realm, all the great emperors lost their combat powers completely. On top of that, Yi Futian pressurized them with his emperor's might, causing them to be deprived of any chance to retaliate. The entire dimension seemed to be frozen. The crowds in Heavenly Imperial City who saw the happening there were dumbfounded. Under the restraint of the great emperors from Heavenly Imperial Palace, the group of arrogant foreign great emperors could not even budge an inch. Although the enemies were a group of great emperors, they were completely at the mercy of Yi Futian, Dong Huang the Great, and Hua Jiyu. To think that the three of them would be so powerful after joining forces. At that time, Hua Jiyu unleashed her spiritual energy with all her might and invaded the opponent's spiritual will. Yi Futian activated his ice spell to destroy their defenses. Some time had passed, but the suppression of their divine powers had not diminished. However, Hua Jiyu had already gotten the information she was looking for. Her eyes narrowed into crescent shapes when she looked at Yi Futian and informed telepathically, they wanted to build a space passage to establish a connection between their universe and ours. Then they planned to let the divine power of the law of their heavenly path invade and occupy our universe. With that, they will become the sovereign of this universe. The look of Yi Futian's eyes turned icy. So these people had evil schemes after all. To think that they wanted to open a space passage between both universes. If that were to happen, they would become a greater threat than the human ancestor since the former was a universe of cultivators. Finish them off. A murderous gleam flashed across Yi Futian's eyes. Yu Tu made his move right after Yi Futian gave the command. A pitch-black demonic blade was unsheathed and slashed the figures of those great emperors in half. Yu Tu made his move right after Yi Futian gave the command. A pitch-black demonic blade was unsheathed and slashed the figures of those great emperors in half. Those extraterrestrial cultivators could not even defend themselves after being suppressed by the three of them. The divine power of revelation and colorless realm restrained them, causing them to be incapable of doing anything. The ominous black demonic blade could cut even the void, creating cracks in the process. Right then, The bodies of the great emperors were reduced to nothing before they could even let out a shriek after being slain. To think that the group of foreign great emperors would be exterminated on the spot. This was not the first time Yi Futian saw his godfather in action. Domineering and ruthlessness were the attributes of a demonic cultivator. The people in Heavenly Imperial City were trembling in fear after witnessing that. Even though they were great Emperor Plane cultivators, they were easily slaughtered without delay. The Heavenly Emperor was confident in his decision-making and would never show mercy to his enemies. Yi Futian remained composed the entire time. Since they would eventually show their true colors and bring harm to this world, it would be disastrous to leave them be. Naturally, ending their lives would be the best course of action. Plus, it could serve as an intimidation to the cultivators from another universe so that they would behave themselves a little. He did not care if doing this would offend the people from the other universe, since they had already planned to build a space passage between two universes for their conquest. It was already beyond the matter of offending the other party. If they had the capability, they would have invaded this universe by that time. Jiyu, what is the cultivation system of their world? What is their overall strength? Yi Futian asked Hua Jiyu. Their cultivation system is a little different from ours, but it will reach the same destination. In the end, they will have to gain enlightenment on the great path and the power of heavenly law. Their highest cultivation level is that of heavenly immortal, which is equivalent to the great emperor plane, Hua Jiyu explained. However, their world is more advanced and complete than ours, like the Age of the Gods where Tianshan army would rule the world. There are different planes to their heavenly immortals: Heavenly Immortal, Immortal King, and Supreme Immortal. It looks like their Immortal King is a parallel to our Super Great Emperor. Meanwhile, their Supreme Immortal counterpart is our Supreme Being, Donghuang the Great murmured. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. That should be the case. Hua Jiyu nodded. The reason they want to open a space passage to our universe is so that their Supreme Immortal can cross over and terraform our world. According to their memories, the supreme rulers of different worlds and universes would cultivate the heavenly laws unique to their home. Therefore, they could not rule over the heavenly laws of other worlds. That's why they want to reprogram the laws of other worlds into theirs first. Yi Futian nodded. Supreme Being should be similar to the nature of his current cultivation level. He was the master of the law inside his world. For instance, he could even change the law of time in there, but he could not do the same in the outer realms or other worlds, except if he devoured that world. This might be the actual purpose of those people. The expressions of the crowd turned gloomy slightly, as they had never expected that there would be threats other than the human ancestor. And to their surprise, those people were from another universe. Jiyu, what do you want to say? Yi Futian questioned after noticing that Hua Jiyu looked a little hesitant to speak. By right, the worlds between the universes should be isolated from one another, so they would not know the existence of other worlds. Yet it seems like our location has been leaked, Hua Jiyu commented in perturbation. In other words, there might be more than one universe that would find us? Yi Futian immediately understood what Hua Jiyu tried to imply. So this would be one of the results following the collapse of the Great Path. Yeah. Hua Jiyu nodded. Yi Futian went silent for a while. It seemed like the only way out would be his attainment of the Supreme Being plane. In retrospect, the worry of his mother back then actually had a legitimate reason. If he could create a world with his micro-heavenly path, it would not be unthinkable to believe in the existence of the multiverse. From analyzing his inner world, he could conclude that every world and universe had its respective rules and laws. In fact, the way time would work in various universes could all be different. Since the locations of each dimension were not the same, it was nearly impossible for any of them to converge. But things had changed since the coordinate of their world had been exposed. Let's go back, Yi Futian commanded. Futian, are you going to the human realm now? Donghuang the Great queried. That's right. Yi Futian nodded. I will meet you up at the border outside the human realm, Donghuang the Great informed. Although he was not against Yi Futian's invasion into the enemy's territory, he would still be there as reinforcement. If anything were to befall the latter, the former could rescue him. I'm following you, Hua Jiyu added. Her strength was greatly increased since she had gained enlightenment on the divine power of the colorless realm. The divine power of the colorless realm was extremely formidable, a class of its own. In the world of Buddhism, the colorless realm was above the desire realm and form realm. Colorless realm was devoid of any material form, which aligned to the Buddhist saying, "All is vanity." Hua Jiyu's divine power of colorless realm was derived from her understanding of colorless realm. At the activation of the divine power, there would not be any physical matter in her world. It was absolute nothingness. This was an immensely powerful divine power that, when cultivated to its pinnacle, could wield an ability that was fundamentally equal to the peerless power of the void in essence. Nevertheless, Hua Jiyu had not reached that tier as of yet. Besides, her current cultivation level was still lower than Donghuang the Great's. Okay. Yi Futian bowed his head. He could tell how powerful the divine power of revelation and colorless realm was after witnessing them earlier. So long as they did not enter the border of the human realm, the both of them would not encounter any danger. Hence, he was not worried about their safety. "All right, let's make our move now," Donghuang the Great stated. Yi Futian turned to look at the others and ordered, "The rest of you should return to the heavenly imperial palace first. We won't be gone for long." "Yes, Your Majesty." Everyone at the scene nodded. Yi Futian was slowly holding an absolute authority over time unknowingly. And it should be accredited to all the cultivators who had cultivated inside the world created with his micro-heavenly path for years. The feat of creating a world was not something just anyone could pull off. If one were to look at this aspect alone, he had long since surpassed his father, Donghuang the Great. That was why everyone agreed with what Donghuang the Great had said. If there were anyone who could reach the Supreme Being plane, it would be Yi Futian. Right then, the three of them transformed into 3 dots of lights and disappeared into thin air. The people in Heavenly Imperial City who caught sight of it were taken aback and thought, "Are His Majesty and Donghuang the Great heading toward human divine palace now?" Had the power balance of the world that was divided into the 6 realms among the 6 great emperors been changed? Did the times slowly transition into the era of the rivalry between the human ancestor and heavenly emperor? The people in the world could hardly catch up with the speed of the ever-changing times. The duration was too short for the people of the outer realms. A frightening pressure permeated the entire area of the human divine palace in the human realm. An authority of heaven emanated from the top floor of the human divine palace. The human ancestor was cultivating while sitting in a lotus position. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked into the distance. "He is coming," a voice could be heard from the sky announcing loudly. Following that, 3 silhouettes could be seen descending from the sky. The 3 of them had temperaments incomparable to any other. Each of them were emitting overpowering auras as if they were holding the authority of the heavens. Simultaneously, the human ancestor stood up and covered the whole human divine palace with his divine consciousness to convey a message. The entire human divine palace was heavily guarded, including the perimeter of the courtyards and the interior. All the cultivators below the great emperor plane had sought shelter inside the principal throne room of the palace complex, as they had predicted something huge was about to happen. The entire human divine palace was heavily guarded, including the perimeter of the courtyards and the interior. All the cultivators below the great emperor plane had sought shelter inside the principal throne room of the palace complex, as they had predicted something huge was about to happen. However, the human ancestor and the gods were protecting the palace at that moment. Who could possibly make them brace themselves for the approaching enemy? Back then, Ji Wudao had invaded the human divine palace when the human ancestor was not around. At that time, the gods did not even show up yet. Suddenly, the sky above the human divine palace trembled violently, which was followed by the appearance of a spine-chilling spatial storm. The dimensional vortex blustered against the atmosphere that brimmed with an unparalleled divine power of space. A while later, the intimidating spatial storm suddenly turned into a space passage. At the other end of the space passage, a white-haired god with divine light surrounding him showed up there. The covering of the 9 dragons' true chi further enhanced his stateliness. and that silhouette was none other than Yi Futian. As he stood there silently, the atmosphere around him beamed with divine light. Just then, a phantasm manifested like the guardian of the sun and moon. He had an extraordinary temperament, making him look even better than before. With a thought, Yi Futian controlled many light dots to cross over from the other side of the space passage to the firmament above the human divine realm. The brilliant light dots appeared in multiple positions that spanned across the boundless sky like the sun, the moon, and the stars. Right after, all the lights turned into humanoid silhouettes. All these figures took the form of Yi Futian as if they were his exterior incarnations. All these dazzling silhouettes were formed with the law of the Great Path. One of them radiated a scorching divine light of the sun, while the other emitted a freezing divine light of the moon. They stood next to each other as if they were the representative of the sun and the moon. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. Every single one of them was the avatar of the heavenly path. The two avatars of the sun and the moon fired terrifying divine light and permeated the entire human divine palace with their powers. Immediately, they turned themselves into the sun and the moon, effusing the divine power of yin and yang while slowly covering the whole human divine palace. At that point, a light screen appeared in the human divine palace out of the blue. It was a sword realm. Eternal Sword Lord sat in a lotus position on top of one of the palaces. Raising his head to look at the sky, he unleashed his sword realm. The moment the divine light of sun and moon touched the sword realm, the latter was eroded. Following that, another avatar of the heavenly path hurled a glaring golden spear while the other one threw a glowing punch at the sword realm. Immediately, the atmosphere quivered, and the sword realm was torn into pieces. Eternal Sword Lord furrowed his brows at the sight of it. Yi Futian and Donghuang the Great had fled from the scene during the previous conflict. So he thought that his sword could eliminate that man this time. But who would have thought that Yi Futian could crush his sword realm with just a mere avatar of the heavenly path when the former's real body did not even show up yet? Lifting his head to stare at the sky, he shot divine light out of his eyes. Sword will pervaded the air when he stretched his hand to the firmament and swung it. In the blink of an eye, a sword river dispersed across the sky and charged toward Yi Futian's avatars of the Great Path. Then, the divine power of yin contacted the sword river, causing a freezing will to dominate the dimension as if the entire space-time was frozen. Nevertheless, it could not restrain the domineering sword. Eventually, the sword traversed in between dimensions as though it surpassed the power of time and space. Bangs similar to earth-shattering sounds could be heard when the sword collided with the avatars of the Great Path. While this was taking place, Yi Futian raised a sword with his hand from the other end of the space passage and thrust forward. A slash that traveled across the fabric of space-time came flying toward Eternal Sword Lord. After sensing an incoming threat, Eternal Sword Lord set up an absolute defense with the Eternal Sword domain by using his thoughts. Unfortunately, the imminent attack destroyed everything in its path, creating clanging sounds in the process before it nearly smashed the defense into smithereens. The overpowering force broke the palace hall underneath Eternal Sword Lord into pieces and eventually turned into dust. Although his body was sent flying backward, he exuded the sword will from his body. After forming sword mudras on both sides of his hands, he hurled them against the fast-approaching sword will. In that instant, a destructive sword chi tempest was stirred up in their surrounding. Boom! After a deafening bang, Eternal Sword Lord was hurled backward and crashed into many buildings and mountain peaks of the human divine palace before he was finally stuck in a corner. Nonetheless, that was not the end. Immediately, he saw countless sword will that crossed the space passage from the other side, aiming at his location as if they intended to demolish the entire human divine palace. Crash! Without warning, an ear-piercing bang was heard. The next moment, that space passage slowly disintegrated. Two silhouettes of the great emperors could be seen hovering in front of its exit point. The two of them attacked the space passage to shatter it. Even though the space passage was destroyed, eerie rumbles could be heard from time to time. All the avatars of the Great Path finally vanished from sight altogether. Although the commotion seemed to have subsided, the hearts of the cultivators of the human divine palace were still trembling in fear. All of them realized that Yi Futian had become even stronger than before. After completing his great path, even Eternal Swordlord could not hold a candle to him anymore. Fear was written all over the faces of the citizens residing in the central city of the human divine palace when they turned in the direction of the palace. All of them could feel the intense battle that had just taken place a while ago in the palace. It was mind-blowing to know that someone dared invade the human divine palace. Who would do something as arrogant as that? At that moment, they felt an immense pressure pervaded the atmosphere, causing them to feel suffocated and depressed. It must be a god's might. The hearts of the cultivators in the city palpitated like mad. Under the suppression of God's might, they felt like prostrating themselves with their faces and knees on the ground. After lifting their heads, they noticed a gigantic countenance that looked incorporeal in the sky. Everyone could see an exceptionally handsome face with long silver hair. It is Heavenly Emperor Yi Futian. Their hearts were beating like a drum as they stared at Yi Futian's stunning profile in the firmament. Back then, the human ancestor had started the War of the Six Realms to execute Yi Futian but failed to do so. Moreover, many of their combatants had lost their lives during Yi Futian's counterattack. No one had expected that Yi Futian would become so powerful when the war had only gone on for a little over 1 year, let alone seeing him invading the human realm. The countenance in the ether was the embodiment of the heavenly path, a supreme being. He was the current heavenly emperor, a man whose predecessor could not even compare. Every person in the city could sense that intense authority of heaven that pressurized the atmosphere from the sky, including the cultivators of the human divine palace. Out of the blue, they caught themselves having a false impression that Yi Futian was the bona fide ruler of this world, the one who truly reigned over the heavenly law. Even the likes of the great emperor plane cultivators felt interior in the face of his authority of heaven. The extraordinarily gifted young prodigy from original realm had become an existence that even the great emperors had to hold in high regard. The eye of a humongous countenance fired a magnificent divine light from the sky and turned into the sun. Then, the scorching divine light of the sun that set the sky ablaze shone on the human divine palace. The eye of a humongous countenance fired a magnificent divine light from the sky and turned into the sun. Then, the scorching divine light of the sun that set the sky ablaze shone on the human divine palace. A powerful divine power of space transformed into a light screen and sealed the void. However, the divine light of the sun penetrated through it upon contact and continued to descend. At that time, everyone inside and outside the human divine palace was trapped in Yi Futian's divine domain of the Great Path. He seemed to have become the supreme ruler of this realm after seizing control. Watch out! A silhouette immediately fled from the spot before the divine light of the sun beamed from above, eventually reaching the human divine palace, turning an area of the palace complex into a burning area. The light formed a pit of fire around the perimeter of the impact. Buzz! A gleam flashed across Yi Futian's eyes. An intense divine light of the sun instantly swept across a huge part of the human divine palace, cutting everything in its path like a massive sword. The scale of the effect could easily demolish the entire palace grounds. Yet, an intimidating destructive aura permeated the sky before the figure of the human ancestor could be seen unleashing his chaotic divine domain. After forming the Chaos True Thunder Sword, he hurled it at Yi Futian. The entire city was shaking violently as the heavenly thunder rumbled. Raising his head, Yi Futian set his eyes on a distant location. The moonlight shone on the Chaos True Thunder Sword, trying to freeze it. Nevertheless, the latter could not be stopped in its track, and it slipped past the constraint of the freezing power. A beam of sunlight radiated, combining its yang energy with its yin energy counterpart. As the divine light of sun and moon dazzled in the sky, it destroyed the Chaos True Thunder Sword and headed in the human ancestor's direction with the intention of killing him. He is way too powerful. Everyone was stunned by the sight of Yi Futian, whose divine power had a radical change since they last saw him. Was that the completed divine power of the Great Path? Previously, Yi Futian did not reach the Great Emperor plane yet, but he had made it to the said tier at that time. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. How was it possible that he could fight the human ancestor equally right after he reached the Great Emperor plane? In fact, he nearly wiped the floor with the human ancestor. What a scary and incredible Great Emperor he was. If one were to compare Yi Futian with the previous 6 Great Emperors, he could very well be the strongest one of them all. Back in those days, were the former Heavenly Emperor and Sovereign Princess as mighty too? Rumble. All the cultivators in the city, including the whole continent, were shivering in fright when another heavenly might suffused in the sky. They couldn't help but feel like falling to their knees. The supreme heavenly might that permeated the sky could be compared to the divine might of the Creator. Everyone who felt it bowed down in submission unconsciously. There was turbulence on the firmament above the human divine palace when the supreme heavenly might encompassed the palace grounds. Every great emperor in that place could feel a superior power looming in the area. While the ancient emperors could recognize the nature of the power, there were still a significant amount of cultivators who had just experienced it for the first time. Many combatants of the human realm were rooted to the spot and shook like a leaf. Was there a powerful being of this caliber in the human divine palace? Who was it? A magnificent divine light suddenly beamed on the human ancestor from the heavens. At that moment, the body of the human ancestor resonated with the entire realm. Meanwhile, an enormous version of his face appeared in the sky. The chaotic divine realm grew stronger steadily. It was like the power of chaos that had existed at the beginning of the universe. A roaring thunderclap comparable to the apocalyptic divine thunder emitted a blinding light that darkened the entire sky. Both the sunlight and the moonlight could not penetrate it. The chaotic true thunder sword accelerated further and collided with the divine light of sun and moon, emitting a sudden burst of dazzling flash. Shortly after the collision, the entire atmosphere turned dim, while the whole city shuddered from the impact. Even the great emperor plane cultivators quivered in panic at the sight of it. Yi Futian faced the human ancestor directly in the darkened sky. Did the latter display the true power of his real body? Yi Futian infiltrated this realm to smoke his nemesis out so that he could gauge the extent of the latter's strength. If the opposition could not stop him, he would not mind wiping the whole human divine palace off the face of the world. In fact, that was his main purpose of being here all along. However, he could sense that the real human ancestor was exceedingly powerful. Now that he had perfected his micro-heavenly path, he could even occupy a world by force and change its heavenly law into his version forcibly. In a nutshell, he could establish his heavenly path outside of his inner world. But he also believed the human ancestor could pull off a feat that would not be paled in comparison. After all, the latter had been cultivating for ages. At that time, he felt a threatening change in the atmosphere. He noticed that he was no longer holding the authority over the heavenly law of this realm. Human ancestor. Yi Futian stared at the face before him and remarked, "It seems like your real body has been here all the time." An overwhelming divine power enclosed the entire boundless realm. At the same time, the insubstantial countenance glared at Yi Futian and retorted, "After all these years, yet another of his descendant has shown up again. The world has been plunging into chaos for too long after the collapse of the heavenly path. It should be united again now. Naturally, I will lead this world into welcoming the age of the gods once more. If the heavenly emperor did not exist, I would have made it a reality by now. Your families have been standing in my way. So, tell me, who is the one making all lives suffer here?" From the former heavenly emperor to the sovereign princess, then to Yi Futian, the three had been the human ancestor's adversaries. The first two had injured him fatally, so he had been recuperating slowly for years. If Yi Futian did not exist, he would have waited for a few years and conquered the whole world in one go. Nonetheless, the reality was often disappointing. Things didn't go as he planned ever since Yi Futian had shown up. After creating a world with the micro-heavenly path, the latter changed the law of time there and used the difference between the time flow of the two worlds for cultivation. Hence, that man gradually became a threat to him. Needless to say, all the efforts and struggles of his enemies would be futile. In the end, Everything would be annihilated and arrive at the end of the line. Yi Futian, if you could set aside our differences and submit to me, I could allow you to ruler over the heavenly law as my representative. You will be second to me. What do you say? He offered in an enticing tone, saying he would raise Yi Futian above all the others and make the latter the first man after him in this world. All the great emperors in the human divine palace were taken aback after hearing his words. It never crossed their minds that the human ancestor would try to subdue Yi Futian. Truthfully, the human ancestor was unsure whether he could dominate and kill Yi Futian in a fight or not. Yi Futian remained his composure after hearing the offer. The human ancestor had been calling himself the righteousness of humanity while he was ruling the human realm all those times. But was he truly the avatar of righteousness? Yi Futian had seen the hypocrisy of the human ancestor. If the latter could bring peace to the world, why would he hide in the dark? Why did he resurrect the gods instead of raising potential cultivators to emerge as the great emperors? Why would he instigate the war of the six realms by commanding the cultivators of the human realm for a conquest which would cause all lives in the world to suffer? Was a heaven-slaying spear forged with a formidable divine power appeared in the sky in response to the human ancestor's offer. He did that to test if the human ancestor was merely a paper tiger. It would not harm for him to try before his return. Kaboom! The spear pierced into the firmament, changing its appearance instantly and traversing the void. The chaotic true thunder sword crashed into the spear. It was pulverized into specks of dust and devoured by the latter. To think that even a sword of that caliber could not stop the spear. The firmament was smashed into smithereens and engulfed by the strike of the spear that was aiming at the humongous face. A violent storm stirred up right after the spear flew past the area. Suddenly, a colossal silhouette of a god with its head above clouds and its feet rooted to the ground appeared out of nowhere. A violent storm stirred up right after the spear flew past the area. Suddenly, a colossal silhouette of a god with its head above clouds and its feet rooted to the ground appeared out of nowhere. The figure took the form of the human ancestor, who became the embodiment of the heavenly path. The spear hit hard on the divine body of the heavenly path, tearing it to tatters and intending to devour it. Yet, the spear was halted by a compelling defense. Surprisingly, the overpowering spear that could engulf an entire world could not break the divine body. It was as if the attack hit on an object with the strongest defense in the world. The body of the human ancestor seemed to nullify all forms of physical attacks on the earth. Bang! A deafening sound rumble blared. The body of the heavenly immortal might have a supreme defense power, but it could not prevent the spear from quivering its figure, causing cracks to appear and piercing through it. Simultaneously, divine power gathered around the body of the heavenly immortal. At that moment, Yi Futian felt that his spear did not hit on mortal flesh but a complete world that could not be shaken. He could sense the energy in the entire human realm accumulated in the body of the human ancestor upon impact. At that, he could not help but draw in a cold breath. His father, Donghuang the Great, had activated the Revelation Divine Matrix during the War of the Six Great Emperors, and it covered the entire continent of the Divine Prefecture. Instantly, Yi Futian knew that his father had become one with the Divine Prefecture at that time. Still, the human ancestor had somehow gone to the next level by becoming the personification of the world itself. In other words, he was indestructible. A supreme power flowed toward the human ancestor from every part of the boundless sky. At the same time, he opened both of the eyes of his towering face and glanced at the ground condescendingly, exuding an intimidating aura toward Yi Futian. He saw a formless and incorporeal divine sword that looked like the sword of the heavenly path when an invisible power rushed toward him. Without warning, it infiltrated his spirit domain destructively. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. Yi Futian immediately let out a groan as his spirit was being attacked. The sword of the heavenly path tried to wreak havoc inside the immaterial domain and obliterate his spiritual soul. Boom! A tremendous pressure caused Yi Futian's body to fall back a little. Manifesting his face in the sky, he glared at the enormous countenance opposite him. As he had speculated, the human ancestor could come into the world already. It would not be long before the latter's comeback. This realm had become his opponent's territory. Yi Futian, even though you can alter the flow of time, your cultivation level still isn't sufficient to put up a good fight. You would escape the death penalty if you chose submission. The human ancestor's voice resounded through the atmosphere. Every cultivator in the human realm could hear his words. The people who were dispersed across the vast continent felt a violent tremor, so much so that they somehow saw the happening in the human divine palace. Although none of them could comprehend why they were seeing this, it didn't change the fact that it was happening. At that point, they had an epiphany moment that their monarch, the human ancestor, was the bona fide supreme being in this world. Even though the heavenly emperor invaded their realm, he was still a junior. The human ancestor was the cultivator who had been around since ancient times. Yi Futian shot the opposition a quick glance and turned his eyes on the gods of the human divine palace. He sighed. "Greeting, gods of ancient times. All of you had stood against the heavenly path during those days. Yet, you are willing to stoop so low as to be someone else's lackeys now. I believed none of them had heard about the name of the human ancestor back then, right?" The pupils of the gods shrunk upon hearing that. Chills ran down their spines as they stared at Yi Futian. Indeed, none of them had heard of the human ancestor during the battle of heavenly laws. But times had changed, and things were nothing like what they used to be. The human ancestor had become the most powerful being in the world. He was also the one responsible for their resurrections and ruled over them. Truth be told, the gods actually had mixed feelings, as they were all individuals who had once distinguished themselves as the pinnacles in this world, all the more so for the super-great emperors. When they had become elites, the human ancestor was probably still a small fry at that time. "I wish you all the best," Yi Futian uttered. Right then, his face gradually dissipated until it vanished from sight completely. Despite that, the human ancestor did not make a move at all. Obviously, he could not confine the former there. After lowering his head, the human ancestor looked at the people and affirmed, "Listen. Don't be fooled by his slanderous words. I have joined forces with all of you to establish a new heavenly law, and you will be the ones who create the new world that is to come." After the human ancestor finished speaking, he enveloped the whole world with his thoughts. Instantly, everyone in the human realm could feel a supreme god's might. No matter where they were looking from, all of them could see the countenance of the human ancestor in the firmament. Peering at all the living beings on the continent, the human ancestor declared, "There are countless cultivators in the human realm, and all of them called me as the human ancestor. But there are only a handful of you people who truly know me well. During the age of the ancient heavenly path, I, too, was once a mortal human like most of you. The gods and immortals would rule over the law of the world while looking at us humans condescendingly. In the eyes of the gods who controlled the heavenly law, mortals are inferior beings. Even if we reached a high tier in cultivation, we would still be lowly to them. Even so, there were a lot of ambitious people who had set the goal to gain enlightenment on the great path and become a god. But since the age of the gods, I have always believed that humans could decide their own fate. Every cultivator in this world is the main character of the heavens. We could be comparable to the likes of the gods even with mortal bodies of flesh and blood. After the battle of the heavenly laws, the collapse of the heavenly path happened. Many gods had died in the process, but I somehow managed to survive through the ordeal. Since then, I've made it my ultimate goal to revive the glorious age of the distant past. However, it is no longer the age of the gods but yours. Each and every one of you can cultivate to become a god. This is also one of the things that I've put all my efforts to achieve all these years. The human realm thrived. Nevertheless, some of the conservatives grew resentful. Since the emergence of a new heavenly emperor, he has been reigning the heavenly realm and desires for the revival of the old heavenly law. An age where only the gods rule the world is not good. Although I've wished to see the restoration of the glorious days of the age of the gods, I've hoped to start anew with new heavenly law as well. Yet, the former heavenly emperor and his descendants were relentless with their hindrance to our grand plan. And it went on until the latest generation, which is Yi Futian. He too is the same with his conduct. 1 year ago, I had led our legions into the heavenly realm, the land of the divine prefecture. All in the name to unite the order of the 7 realms with the sword of justice. From then, there will be no war in the world where everyone can gain enlightenment to become a great emperor. It will be a world where a mortal being can ascend to godhood and become the master of the world. Everyone will be the same, a world with perfect order, equality, and absolute justice. Nonetheless, our troops who invaded the heavenly realm and the divine prefecture lost their lives there. The top clan of the human realm, Orthodox Unity, was abolished, and its people were annihilated. As you saw earlier, Futian infiltrated the human divine palace and demolished it while attempting to finish off every cultivator there. Futian, Donghuang the Great, and the Buddha had created the Tianshan army to follow them everywhere. They are the representatives of the conservatives, who care only about their personal benefits and will destroy anything and anyone that goes against their interest. Therefore, I shall bring you with me to stand up and fight. With the sword of justice in my hand, I shall conquer the 7 realms. Now, who is with me to create a new world and establish a new heavenly law? The voice of the human ancestor was orotund. At that time, everyone in the entire human realm was greatly moved by his speech, and it created a resonance within the heavens. Suddenly, all the cultivators in that realm had a powerful urge to immediately charge toward the heavenly realm to kill the heavenly emperor, Futian. Divine light beamed from the sky of a city in the human realm while an intangible power rested on the crowd there. Divine light beamed from the sky of a city in the human realm while an intangible power rested on the crowd there. The voice of the human ancestor brimmed with a mysterious power that created a resonance with everyone in the realm. Instantly, a hint of hostility flashed across their eyes. They were overwhelmed with the itch to charge toward the heavenly realm and the divine prefecture to exterminate the heavenly emperor, Futian. A voice reverberated in their minds as they raised their heads to stare at the face of the human ancestor with anger. We shall storm the heavenly imperial palace to slaughter Futian and unite the 7 realms. We will join you in your conquest, human ancestor. We will join you in your conquest, human ancestor. Similar voices echoed throughout the vast continent. All of them were willing to fight alongside the human ancestor to establish a new heavenly law. According to the narration of the human ancestor, Futian was a villain who had committed crimes against humanity. Meanwhile, the former represented absolute justice. In no time at all, Futian returned to the 99 heavens of the heavenly realm. Futian arrived above the heavenly palace together with Donghuang the Great and Huajiu. The great emperors like Yu Tu, Gu Donglu, and the others came to the top of the heavenly palace to welcome the 3 of them back. How was everything? The string emperor asked. He finally felt a little relieved after seeing his young master's safe return. After all, the former heavenly emperor and the sovereign princess had lost their lives to the human ancestor. Thus, all of them had intense animosity toward their nemesis, the human ancestor. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. The expressions on Futian and Donghuang the Great's faces turned solemn. Then the former turned to look at the latter and questioned, "Father, what do you think of this?" "There is a high likelihood that the human ancestor refined the human realm," Donghuang the Great replied. All the cultivators peered at Donghuang the Great in confusion. Shortly after, the latter said, "The human ancestor had created his law of the great path. While I'm only coding the law of my own around the divine prefecture, the human ancestor had gone beyond that level. He had refined the entire human realm and changed the law of the great path in that realm completely. In short, the whole realm will be under the dominion of his will." Does that mean the human ancestor can exert his manipulation directly onto the cultivators of the human realm? Futian queried. He had felt a threatening aura there previously. When the human ancestor spoke to everyone in the human realm, a resonance was created. His words had turned into the power of emotions and affected all the cultivators there. Yeah. Donghuang the Great nodded. The human ancestor must have cultivated some unique divine power of the law. So, he had been refining and assimilating with that realm all these years. In the end, he became the world itself, and all the cultivators inside will be controlled by him. As you mentioned earlier, the said resonance could allow him to exert his influence directly onto all sentient beings, including the cultivators there. In other words, a whole continent of the cultivators in the human realm will fight for the human ancestor once the war starts. The String Emperor frowned and continued, "Why did he insist on starting this war? I guess that has to do with his cultivation." Dong Huang the Great's expression turned grim. "I'm afraid a war on a bigger scale will be unavoidable." There were 6 legions in the 99 heavens at that moment. Still, Yi Futian hoped to prevent the war from breaking out but not starting one. It would be better if the great emperors could settle the conflict among themselves. However, things had already gotten out of hand. What he had wished for before would never happen. When I launched an attack at the human ancestor earlier, the impact of the strike did not feel like flesh and blood but a complete world. It looks like the human ancestor's defense in the human realm is made up of the entire realm's force. So, it will be hard to inflict any real damage to him. Yi Futian recalled the details of the clash with the human ancestor earlier. To his surprise, he could not break through the latter's defense even with his strongest offense. Following that, he was repelled and left the human divine palace. Dong Huang the Great nodded. Since the human ancestor refined the human realm, that whole domain will become his world where he is the strongest. But once he leaves there, he will be weakened to a certain extent. That must be why he had never left the human realm but had been dispatching his exterior incarnation outside. Yi Futian bowed his head. His expedition to the human realm this time had helped him gauge the situation of the human divine palace. The exterior incarnation of the human ancestor had the strength of the 6 great emperors. Nevertheless, he was even more powerful in the human realm. He was already invincible when he did not fully recover yet. Just how mighty would he become after his complete recovery? The other ancient emperors were at the level of the 6 great emperors, which could be compared to the super great emperor. He had confidence that he could take down the super great emperor cultivators without breaking a sweat already. Rumble. Yi Futian and the others felt a violent shaking while they were having a conversation. In fact, all the cultivators in the 99 heavens could feel that intense tremor. Then they lifted their heads to look at the sky. What just happened? Yi Futian looked into a distant location of the 99 heavens. In no time, he noticed a hole torn open in the sky. It was perforated by a matchless divine power. What is going on? Everyone immediately looked at Yi Futian. The human ancestor is opening a space passage to the heavenly realm, Yi Futian stated as he stared into the distance with an expressionless look. After the space passage was built to its completion, a massive door of space could be seen appearing in the sky, which connected 2 different points in spacetime. At the same time, a similar towering space passage showed up in the land of the divine prefecture from the human realm. The same space passage appeared even in the Western heaven world of Buddhism. The same thing happened even in the skies of the empty divine realm, the devil world, and the dark world. There was a great commotion all around the 7 realms. All the cultivators raised their heads and gazed at the space passages from different locations. In that instant, they knew a great change had already taken place. The fact that the human ancestor opened the space passages that connected the 7 realms would mean that he wanted to start the war of the 7 realms. No matter who they were, no one could escape from it. In the devil world, the cultivators of the devil imperial palace gaped at a distant location while the devil abyss was roaring violently. They saw a spatial portal pierced through the devil abyss with an overwhelming divine power. Meanwhile, the silhouette of the Devil Emperor could be seen at the peak of the Devil Imperial Palace as he looked at that source of the ruckus. He did not let the people of the Devil world join the war because he was secretly helping his people to improve their cultivation level. Still, everything happened so quickly to the point that he could not even react to it. In just 1 year, there was a radical change in the world. A short while ago, Yi Futian had invaded the human divine palace. The strength that he had displayed was clearly above the likes of the 6 great emperors. In his battle with the human ancestor, the latter had exhibited his almighty abilities as well. Nonetheless, the improvement of the Devil Emperor's cultivation after 1 year was unremarkable. Yuxing was the only person with an impressive breakthrough at his cultivation level. It should be accredited to Yi Futian, who had given Yuxing a spatial magical item so that the latter could use it for his cultivation for the past years. When Yi Futian first came to the Devil Imperial Palace back then, the Devil Emperor had only seen the former as a junior slowly making history. But he had never once expected to see his juniors not only make histories but also be playing leading roles. The changes in the world were too fast for him to catch up. Devil Emperor, the human ancestor called from the humongous door of space. "What business do you have?" said the Devil Emperor as he looked towards the door of space. "What business do you have?" said the Devil Emperor as he looked towards the door of space. "I wish to reset the order of the 7 realms and revive the age of the gods. Would the Devil world be willing to join me?" asked the human ancestor as his voice reverberated in the space. The cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace stared at the face that appeared beyond the door of space. Their gazes were filled with demonic will that was as cold as ice. The human ancestor did not hide his ambition at all. He wanted to reset the order of the 7 realms and revive the age of the gods. However, this age would be controlled by him. Now, there were already various gods under his command. "I am not interested," replied the Devil Emperor as he swept a glance at the face of the human ancestor. A cold snort could be heard. A menacing aura descended from the door of space as beams of terrifying destructive light shot out. They became chaotic divine thunder that directly filled the Devil Abyss. For a moment, it trembled violently. Countless light of catastrophe descended, causing the cultivators of the Devil world to reveal astonished expressions as they looked up at the rampaging Devil Abyss. For the cultivators of the Devil world, the Devil Abyss was both a holy land and a source of destruction. The history of the Devil world was a history of blood and tears as they struggled under the Devil Abyss. Menacing jet-black demonic light shot out from the Devil Emperor's pupils as he stared at the human ancestor's face. The latter continued, "I know that you can borrow the power of the Devil Abyss. However, do not forget that I can also cause it to rampage." The Devil Emperor fell silent when he heard him say this. Destructive light of catastrophe shot out from his pupils. The human ancestor had struck his weakness. If the Devil Abyss were to rampage, it would be catastrophic for the Devil world. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. For many years, the Devil Emperor had dealt with the Devil Abyss and withstood its power. Hence, it had not rampaged. "This is your justice?" asked the Devil Emperor in a tone as cold as ice. So, the human ancestor's justice was to destroy the Devil world? Do not forget the identity of the Devil world. "The lands of the Devil Abyss were originally a prison," said the human ancestor indifferently. "Now is the time for the Devil world to correct its name. Only by resetting the world order can the identity of the Devil world be changed." The human ancestor was clearly mocking them. The Devil world was but a prison in ancient times. As for the cultivators of the Devil world, they were merely prisoners. The only way for them to shed their status as prisoners was to reset the world order. Hence, the human ancestor invited them to join the war. The cultivators of the Devil world had always considered this to be their humiliation. Now, the human ancestor brought it up. The cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace revealed looks of rage. Demonic will roared and churned from their figures. They seemed ready to fight. However, the Devil Emperor was unusually calm. The human ancestor had found his weakness and wanted to make him compromise. He saw the insufferable arrogance of the human ancestor. This existence, which had survived since ancient times, had revealed his true colors. Nevertheless, the Devil Emperor remained silent. The human ancestor continued, "Devil Emperor, the human realm, the empty divine realm, and the dark world are already amassing their armies to invade. Rally the armies of the Devil world immediately and join the war. We shall enter the lands of the heaven realm as well as the divine prefecture and unify the 7 realms." The face gradually disappeared after he said this. However, his voice could still be heard, saying, "If you refuse to comply, the Devil world will receive the blessing of the Devil Abyss." This voice reverberated across the sky. The expressions of the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace were very ugly. The human ancestor was directly threatening them. "Your Highness!" The cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace cried out as they looked up at the Devil Emperor, who was high in the sky. He remained standing there silently. His figure was tall and imposing. However, there was an air of melancholy about him. He was the domineering ruler of the Devil world, the Devil Emperor. No one in his life had ever threatened him. Yet now, the human ancestor was threatening him with the lives of all in the Devil world, forcing him to submit and follow the former into battle. The Devil Emperor looked at the spatial passageway that had yet to close. He then ordered, "Summon the cultivators of the Devil world. Prepare for war." At that moment, the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace all fell silent. They knew that His Highness, the Devil Emperor, had yielded. When the human ancestor came last time, the Devil Emperor was already prepared to fight a war. Even if they were to go to war, it would be because the Devil world wanted to do so of their own accord and not that they were threatened. That was their stance. However, this time, the Devil Emperor had compromised. It was not for himself but for the Devil world. After giving the order, the Devil Emperor's silhouette disappeared. He came to the Devil Abyss and looked at Yusheng. Now, the entire Devil world was being held hostage. They could only break the status quo if Yusheng controlled the power of the Devil Abyss. From the looks of it, Yi Futian had truly foreseen that Yusheng would face a huge catastrophe when he sent over the treasure. A frightening and vast army of cultivators, consisting of members from the human realm, the Devil world, the empty divine realm, and the dark world, was gathering. The forces who had been forced back by the 6 major legions led by Yi Futian before this were especially eager about the upcoming war. They were all dissatisfied. Now, they had a chance to make a comeback with the power of 4 realms. They were no longer scattered forces. They had gathered together and were preparing to attack the Heaven realm as well as the Divine Prefecture. This time, their armies would invade the Heaven realm, the Divine Prefecture, and then the Western Heaven in one fell swoop. The lands of the 7 realms would finally be unified. In the human realm, from countless cities across the continents, various cultivators were traversing across the sky towards the continent where the human divine palace was located. Above the continents of the human realm, the large groups of cultivators were having discussions as they traveled. Right then, above a certain continent, a cultivator asked, "Elder Brother Wang, are you also heading over to the human divine palace?" Another cultivator replied, "How could I possibly miss such a grand occasion? This is probably a once-in-a-lifetime event." That's right. Such an opportunity only comes once over hundreds of centuries. What an honor it is to be able to personally take part. "Everyone be careful," someone down below called up and waved goodbye. "Friend, don't worry. When we return, the 7 realms will have been unified, and we will all be the pioneers of the new world order," a cultivator in the sky said loudly. "Farewell." As he said this, the sword beneath his feet shot across the sky, and he disappeared without a trace in an instant. Such scenes were occurring all over the human realm. They would all be fighting for justice on behalf of the human ancestor. They were going to war to unify the 7 realms and seize control of the world order. The door of space of the human realm was located outside the human divine palace. Countless cultivators had gathered in this region. They looked towards the palace with stern expressions. Many bowed respectfully as they offered up their worship. This was the cultivation court of the human ancestor. He was the god of the human realm and their faith. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.